What if I told you that in 1962, top American military leaders proposed a secret plan to kill innocent American citizens, bomb American cities, hijack civilian airplanes, and blame it all on another country? Not as a conspiracy theory, not as fiction, but as an official government plan. Signed, written, presented to the President of the United States. A plan so disturbing that even the President himself was horrified, and for decades the public had no idea it even existed. Tonight, we uncover the terrifying truth behind one of the most chilling declassified operations in American history. Operation Northwoods, the plan that revealed just how close a government can come to turning against its own people. 1962, the Cold War was boiling. America and the Soviet Union stood on the edge of nuclear annihilation. Every newspaper headline screamed fear. Children practiced duck and cover drills in schools. Families built fallout shelters in their backyards. And only 90 miles from Florida stood a new communist enemy, Cuba, led by the fiery revolutionary Fidel Castro. To Washington, Castro wasn't just a political problem. He was a nightmare, a Soviet ally planted directly beside America. And after the humiliating failure of the Bay of Pigs invasion, military leaders were desperate for justification, desperate for war, and desperate enough to consider the unthinkable. Inside the Pentagon sat the most powerful military officials in America, generals, admirals, strategists, men trusted with the defense of an entire nation. At the center was Lemnitzer, a respected four-star general, calm, decorated, experienced. And in 1962, he helped oversee a proposal that would later shock historians. The Joint Chiefs believed the American public would never support a full-scale invasion of Cuba without a dramatic reason. So they decided to create one, artificially. They drafted a secret document, cold, detailed, bureaucratic. The title sounded harmless. Justification for U.S. military intervention in Cuba, but inside was something terrifying. The proposals inside Operation Northwoods were horrifyingly specific, not vague ideas, not rough concepts. Actual operational suggestions. One proposal discussed staging violent attacks in American cities, especially Miami. The document literally suggested creating a communist Cuban terror campaign. Bombings, arson, fake evidence, manufactured panic. The goal? Convince Americans that Cuba had attacked them. Another proposal suggested sinking a boat carrying Cuban refugees. Real people, real deaths. Another plan discussed blowing up a U.S. military ship and blaming Cuba. A modern echo of the USS Maine explosion. But it got even darker. One section of Operation Northwoods chilled investigators for decades, the hijacking scenario. Military planners proposed replacing a civilian aircraft with a secretly operated drone. The real passengers would quietly disembark under a false identity. Then the empty drone plane would be destroyed remotely. The world would believe innocent civilians had been murdered by Cuban forces. Newspapers would explode with outrage. Television anchors would demand retaliation. America would cry for war, all based on a lie. The documents even described faking passenger lists, fake funerals, fake evidence, fake grief. Everything engineered to manipulate public emotion, and these weren't rogue extremists. These were America's highest military authorities. Perhaps the most disturbing proposal focused on Florida, especially Miami. The plan suggested planting bombs in public places, attacking Cuban refugees, creating fear inside American communities. The document openly proposed, we could develop a communist Cuban terror campaign in the Miami area. Imagine reading that sentence knowing it came from your own government. Not a foreign enemy, not a terrorist organization, your own military leadership. People whose job was to protect civilians. The goal was psychological warfare. Fear creates anger. Anger creates unity. Unity creates support for war. And the architects of Northwoods understood that perfectly. Then the documents reached the desk of John F. Kennedy. Young, charismatic, still recovering politically from the Bay of Pigs disaster, military leaders expected approval. Instead, they got rejection, complete rejection. Kennedy was reportedly horrified. He refused the operation. No bombings. No staged attacks. No false flag campaign. No war built on lies. For one brief moment, Operation Northwoods died. But the fact it had existed at all changed everything, because now there was proof. Proof that powerful officials had seriously considered murdering or terrorizing civilians for political objectives, and that realization haunted people for decades. The plan remained classified, locked away, buried inside government archives. Most Americans never heard the name Operation Northwoods. Years passed, presidents changed, wars came and went. Then decades later, the documents resurfaced. Declassified, public, real, historians stared at them in disbelief. Because the language was unmistakable. There was no ambiguity, no misunderstanding. The papers described false flag operations against American targets. Officially, and suddenly people began asking dangerous questions. If this operation existed, what else existed? The phrase false flag suddenly carried terrifying weight. A false flag operation is an attack designed to appear as though someone else committed it. Historically, governments throughout the world have used such tactics. But seeing America's own military propose it against civilians shocked many people. It shattered assumptions. People wanted to believe governments had moral limits. Northwood suggested otherwise. And perhaps the most disturbing part was how calmly the proposals were written. No emotional language, no hesitation. Just clinical planning, like discussing weather forecasts. That emotional detachment terrified readers more than the plan itself, because it revealed how dangerous institutions become when objectives matter more than human lives. Only months later, the world entered the Cuban Missile Crisis, the closest humanity ever came to nuclear war. Soviet missiles in Cuba, American naval blockades, nuclear bombers prepared for launch for 13 days. Civilization stood at the edge of extinction. And historians later wondered, what if Kennedy had approved Northwoods before this crisis? Could fake attacks have triggered a full invasion? Could that invasion have escalated into nuclear war? Could millions have died because of a staged incident? The possibilities are horrifying. One question always emerges. How could intelligent military leaders propose something like this? The answer may be fear. Cold War paranoia infected everything. Officials believed communism threatened civilization itself. Some likely convinced themselves the ends justified the means. If sacrificing a few lives prevented Soviet expansion, perhaps they saw it as necessary. That's what makes Operation Northwoods so frightening. Not because monsters created it, but because ordinary officials did. Educated men, decorated men, patriotic men, people capable of convincing themselves that evil was acceptable, if wrapped inside national security. When the documents became public, trust changed forever for many Americans. Conspiracy theories exploded. People revisited historical tragedies asking, what if? Some theories went far beyond evidence, others remained grounded in documented facts. But Northwoods permanently altered public perception, because now there was undeniable proof that deception at the highest levels was possible. And once people lose faith in institutions, that fear never fully disappears. Every future crisis becomes suspect. Every tragedy raises questions. That is the long psychological shadow of Operation Northwoods. Another terrifying element was the media strategy. The plan relied heavily on emotional public reaction. Television, newspapers, headlines, outrage. Military planners understood something deeply important. People support war when they feel attacked, especially emotionally. The public would never know the evidence was fabricated. They would only see the images. Burning buildings, dead civilians, crying families. And in moments of fear, people rarely stop to question the narrative. Operation Northwoods exposed how easily mass emotion could potentially be manipulated. And that realization remains frightening even today. Imagine if Kennedy had said yes. Imagine waking up to reports of bombings in Miami, reports of Cuban attacks, hijacked planes, explosions, dead civilians. The entire nation demanding revenge. Within days, American troops invade Cuba. The Soviet Union responds, nuclear tensions escalate. History changes forever. Perhaps millions die. Perhaps cities vanish. Perhaps civilization itself changes, and the scariest part? Most citizens would never know the truth. They would believe the attacks were real. They would support war, because the illusion would be complete. Some historians believe Kennedy's rejection deepened tensions between him and military leadership. After the Bay of Pigs disaster, Kennedy had already become distrustful of intelligence agencies and generals pushing aggressive action. Northwoods may have intensified that divide. He reportedly wanted tighter control over military operations. And in rejecting Northwoods, Kennedy drew a clear line. There were limits, at least for him. But the existence of the proposal suggested some officials were willing to cross those limits if given permission. That realization remains deeply unsettling. Today, the declassified Operation Northwoods documents are publicly accessible. Researchers can read them. Historians analyze them, students study them, and nearly everyone has the same reaction: disbelief. Because the proposals feel like something from a dystopian thriller. Yet they were real, typed onto official government paper, reviewed by senior officials, presented seriously. The documents became one of the clearest examples of how secrecy and fear can distort morality inside powerful institutions. Operation Northwoods creates one final terrifying question. What operations never became public? Governments classify information for decades, sometimes forever. History repeatedly reveals secret programs long after the people involved are dead. Surveillance operations, human experiments, covert wars, political manipulation. Northwoods proved that shocking plans can exist behind closed doors without public awareness. And if one operation this disturbing remained hidden for years, What else still waits inside locked archives? What plans were approved? What operations succeeded? And which truths may never surface at all? Operation Northwoods was never carried out. No staged bombings happened. No fake hijacked plane exploded. No false Cuban terror campaign unfolded. Because one president refused to authorize it, but the documents remain a chilling warning. Not about one country, not about one decade, but about power itself. Because history shows that fear can push governments toward unimaginable decisions. And when secrecy hides those decisions from the public, democracy becomes fragile. Operation Northwoods forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable reality. Sometimes the greatest danger to a nation may come from the people sworn to protect it. So here's the question. If Operation Northwoods had remained classified forever, would anyone today believe it was real?